Birmingham, so if anyone's got any sort of Q&A, anything they'd like to ask, doesn't really matter what topic you want to ask about, then by all means, fire away and we can address
it. If we do anything in our community, how do we give National Rebirth Party some of the credit?
So, what I would say is you've almost got to not initially use social media.
Yourself.
Yeah, you've got to basically you've got to be genuine. Like if you're doing something, whether it's like a litter pick or some community activity where you are, yeah, by all means tell people that we're doing it because I'm from this political party, I believe in this cause. But basically, you have to show people that you're not doing it just so you can take pictures of it and put it on the internet. And the thing is, the people that need to see it will see it. They absolutely will. And remember that all the people online that see pictures of activism, whatever, those people aren't necessarily the people that are going to elect you. The people that live where you are, the people that know you, they're the people that need to see it. And I think what you'd also find is that other people, if they see things you're doing that they think are good, other people will do the promotion for you. Other people will tell people about it. They'll say, oh, these people did this, or I saw those people do that. If you do it with an air of humility where people basically have to believe that you're not doing it just to get attention for doing it. And I think something else I would say is, if people ask, well, why are you doing this? Or you want to tell people why you're doing something, you've really got to show them you're doing it because of your political beliefs, you're doing it because of the things you believe in.
Just because you care about the community.
Because the core of your beliefs is to effectively do things for other people, treat your neighbour like yourself. And
so not shout about it yourself, let others shout about it for you, kind of thing.
Maybe you can offer something on this, because you've done a lot of stuff around these.
Regarding your community, if you love your own community like you see it, find out when there's a residents association meetings, find out where the community centres are, find out what meetings they are, invite yourself, sit back, listen, because all the concerns in that community will come from there. The more you attend, the more they get to know you. Then, when you go in gently, you might have new ideas. Promote them ideas. Then get on board. And like you say, you can go from there. You don't have to say anything about the party. If they ask you your interest, okay, that's fine. But you've got to start basics and then promote yourself further and further.
Cheers.
Anybody else?
Just looking at what, because I haven't read your manifesto, so I can't give too many opinions, but how would you look on the world stage as National Rebirth Party? How are you going to grow Britain? How's it going to look?
So you mean once we've got to the point where we're actually forming a government? So I think one of the goals has to be to actually create a much greater level of self-sufficiency in Britain. I appreciate that you're never ever going to have a situation where your country is totally independent of foreign economies or influence, because the only country that's like that is North Korea, and it's terrible. And that's not really anything that you'd be wanting to replicate. But I think what you need to be doing is, as much as you can, so as much as you are able to, you need to be investing in your own industries, you need to be investing in your own people, we need to be reorganising our economy such that we can bring back a lot of the industries that have been offshored to places like China and India, so that not only can our economy become much more self-reliant, but also it provides massive employment opportunities for our own people. We need to look at trying to reduce the portion of our economy which is service-based and replace it with goods-based, simply because that is actually producing things that are of use to people. And what I would say economically, one of the strongest countries in the world economically at the moment is China. Obviously it's a big economy, but the reason why China is very strong economically is not just because it's big, but because by and large, it does have this nationally directed economy where it's not like the Chinese economy of the 60s where the state owns everything and it's communism. China's economy now is very much one where it's like limited socialism. So private enterprise can effectively do what it wants, but the state determines the overall economic goals. The government finances businesses that serve those goals. If you're a large corporation, the chances are the government will own a small part of that. Not outright, but they will own shares in it. That economic model has, and I'm using China as a good example, but that economic model has created a very stable economy that doesn't tend to suffer from the same kind of depressions and downturns that a lot of Western economies have suffered from in the last 20 years. And so I think that once we have been able to create this more self-sufficient national economy, that then will give us much more of a voice on the world stage, because we're not constantly relying on other countries to bail us out. We're not relying on the Americans to bail us out. We're not relying on the EU to bail us out. And so I think with independence and self-reliance does come a better position on the world stage.
What about the green agenda? What do you think to that?
Well, I think the green agenda is very much con, in the sense of all they've done, for one thing, a lot of it has been to offshore the problem to Asia and then claim that it's helping the environment when it isn't. No. If anything, it's probably worse, because if those industries were here, we could actually control the way they behave and could control the pollution they put out, whereas when they've been offshore to places like Bangladesh, they don't care. And so it's actually, if somebody wanted to talk about it from a green point of view, I would say, well, us doing that has actually made that problem worse. I think that the whole green agenda has also just been massively exploited in order to funnel money into a lot of Ponzi schemes and a lot of dead-end industries. I don't know how many people know that even people on the sort of traditional radical right, far right, are guilty of this, because I'm fairly certain that even Rupert Lowe has invested a load of money in green energy companies whilst simultaneously decrying it every day on social media, and so is Nigel Farage.
Also on the green agenda, basically, the green agenda and the vote to get in, because they're trying to split Labour and the Conservatives, and that is a safe bet. But when you talk about the Green agenda and the Green Party, whatever, right, I know a council, you know a council very well. Majority of our points he agrees with, but he won't come out and make a statement of that. He gets involved in the community.
Because he gets his shekels.
But he gets money, but he doesn't do as much as I do, and he knows I'm a threat. What he'll talk about on his pages of social media is what he does, but he never mentioned the green effect. He never mentioned it. Yeah, he knows where his income is.
I think that's probably worth bringing out, actually, because it's just
think about it,
just on a bit of a tangent, because it's related to your question about things to do in the community. He's an example of a person who does a lot, that councillor, he does a lot in his area, much like what you did, Lewis, you know, when you were a councillor, but he doesn't overtly do everything for his party. But it does actually win him the respect. It does win him the respect.
So is he wearing his badge to appease people, is that what you mean? Sort of like, look at me, what I'm doing for the community.
Well, I asked him once why. I asked him why he joined the Greens, and it was a fair answer. And his answer to me was, well, at the time he was getting involved in politics, it was the only party other than Labour in his area that was doing anything. So that was his reason, and he's just stuck. He's stuck with it. I think the sort of environmental agenda. I think the approach we take, and it's in our party manifesto. The approach that we take to it is, look, you have to accept some degree of environmental destruction, pollution, waste, you name it. You have to accept that as the price for living in an industrialised society with decent living standards. If you want to live in a society where no one pollutes anything, there's no no industrial pollutants, there's no waste, then you have to go and live on North Sentinel Island in the Stone Age. So you're going to have, you have to accept that. Therefore, it's not about how do we eliminate that, it's about how do we control and mitigate that without destroying our quality of life. Because, and there's a lot of hypocrisy in these people who proclaim, oh no, I'll do anything for the planet. It is hypocritical, because if you took those people to Siberia, stuck them in a tundra, gave them a bucket of coal, they would burn it in order to not die. So when push comes to shove, it is hypocrisy.
That's a very honest answer.
True, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very
True.
And what about welfare? Because I would really like to shrink welfare, as in pay, the working people more, and just see welfare really.
And NHS and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
What are your thoughts?
So we do, again, we touch on this in point 19, I think it is, where what we propose is that the welfare system needs to shift from a welfare system more to a workfare system. And what I mean by that is, when you go to a job centre, or you go to someone and say, I don't have an income, help me, instead of just sticking those people on a dependency income, which in many cases does trap people there, and there's parts of the country like South Wales, the North East, large areas around Glasgow and the Clyde, where you've had 2 or 3 generations of people trapped in unemployment because there's just no work and they just say, here's some job seekers allowance, but it's never going to help them find any. So what we propose is that the whole labour market and organisation and employment system needs to be much more centrally organised, so that effectively a person who doesn't have a job or doesn't have an income can turn up and say, I have no income, help me. And instead of just saying, right, here's £150 a week or whatever it is, go find a job, it's, okay, well, here's a database, here's some jobs and things in your area, here's ones that match your skills, here's a date where you can start, be at this place next Monday, and then you've got employment. It's not always going to be the best paid employment, it's not always going to be exactly what they want to do, but the ultimate end goal has to be a situation where anybody that wants work can just be given it. And so they're not then basically just tossed out and told, go find something. Well, if they could find something, they wouldn't be there asking.
Yeah.
Ain't that a little bit down to the employer as well? Because like some people, there's a reason they ain't in work, and that's just because they're not capable of doing it.
But I think you've obviously got to have provisions for people who genuinely have a reason they can't work. There's got to be provisions.
I don't mean ill, I just mean like properly thick people.
Yeah, you would. I think this is.
Can I just say that the last 5 years, I've never known, as a working person, so many people to jump on a bandwagon of, oh, this is wrong with me, that's wrong with me, this is the reason why. They have a lifestyle, and I don't understand that lifestyle.
I think that I think some of that is innate.
And I think it's rejection as well.
It's a lifestyle for them to get paid.
Of course, but it's rejection.
It should be made to work.
It's like if you go back in the 80s and 90s, you served as electrician, you had apprenticeships. 3 years, 5 years, you could go for diplomas. That's all gone.
Exactly, yeah.
That's all gone. Why is that all gone? That's putting people in employment. Like I would bring the national service to 18, take a lot of young people off the streets, let them see the world, do 3 years.
Yeah.
That'll come off the employment list.
Well, I think this is where, like, it's yes, there are people who effectively choose to abuse welfare, and that is I think it's a mentality issue. Some of it is the state is to blame for enabling that in the first place. But I think some of it is also a mentality issue, because you've got people now who effectively think that society owes them something, and that they don't have any, or shouldn't have any obligation to do anything for anybody else. They think society just owes me money, society should just give me a living even if I do nothing for anyone else. And you are going to have people like that, and I think getting rid of that mentality from people, because it is a mental battle. That is, there's a lot of people that would never even occur to them to behave like that, because they wouldn't feel right behaving in that way. Now, I think that
it's a tall thing. You've been taught to be passive consumers out there. And if you look at some of them great buildings out there, that's a real British people.
Yes.
That's what I want to see again. That's the old Britain I want to see.
Like you always, there's two sides to one story. A lot of people these days, right, they would rather get money off the state because if they work, they can't afford to work, they can't afford to live. They can't, if they've got 2 or 3 children, they need to be on a vast income if they're renting or they're buying.
That's where we need to help.
That's where the difference is.
Well, I spend a lot of time living in Gorton in Manchester. Now, at one point, I don't know if it's still the case now, but at one point, Gorton had one of the highest rates of voluntary unemployment in the whole of Britain. But the predominant reason, there was a few reasons. One reason was that there simply isn't much work around there, which I can still believe, at least because all the things that employed people 20, 30 years ago, like the mills, maybe 50 years ago, they've all gone. So there's very little work around there, unless you want to pay a lot of money to commute. But another reason is because if people actually worked, they were worse off. It was basically on benefits, they were low income. If they worked, they were basically in poverty, because as soon as they worked, they were no longer eligible for things like housing benefit, child benefit, whatever it be. So what people found was that they were basically better off just being on the dole, and that is wrong. And that's not so much wrong on them for doing that. You have to then question, well, how has the sort of employment market, the labour market and the welfare system got to a point where people are actually being penalised for having a job?
It's because people have been taught to be, some people, I say some, being taught to be lazy, as in, I'm not going to go and scrub that toilet. I want 15, 16, 17 pounds an hour, plus the cost of living's gone up. But we need to get people back into doing jobs regardless. And if they're on the, if they're getting money from the state, then they need to go and fill these jobs. They must be done.
Yeah, well, this is where I think a lot of our proposals about reorganising society, when we talk about the right and duty of work, about the creation of a national community, a lot of it is based around creating this mentality of British, genuine British values in people. And I think I was saying this at Birmingham the other week, is, what are genuine British values? It's nothing to do with rule of law, freedom, democracy, any garbage like that. Genuine British values is things like hard work, resilience, the greater good, the care about your neighbours. And if you can instill this mindset in people, and you can sort of instill this change in mentality in people won't necessarily have that attitude anymore. And I think this is where there's got to be more to a genuine national party than just complaining about immigrants or complaining about the government. There's actually got to be serious discussion of society, the economy, the political system, the way that people are atomised, and individualism has destroyed a lot of the communality of people.
It's our people likes as well. I mean, if you look at Page Hall in Sheffield, I did a video around there. You've got Slovaks, Gypsy Romanians in there, and Pakistanis. It's an absolute, it's a mess. And all we do is pay to clean it up.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think that a lot of those problems got worse once all of the opportunities for employment started drying up, because once you've taken away people's ability to actually make a living, then over a couple of generations people will stop caring. I mean, if you think, for instance, people that live in somewhere like Merthyr Tydfil, or somewhere like Cardiff, when you've got people that have been in familial unemployment since the 70s, a lot of those people are probably, they won't even bother trying to find work, because they think, well, there's nothing for me anyway, I'm just wasting my time.
But these people in the area, I'm not just blaming immigrants, but they are immigrants who have come in and made it worse. We've allowed that.
Well, immigration, I think, is one of those things where it might not directly cause every problem, but it will take any existing problem and make it worse. You know, if you've got poverty, housing, cost of living, the economy, it will make all of those issues worse the more of it there is. But I think that is why, when we talk about the economy, what we propose economically would also enable us to move away from the dependency on immigrant labour and the dependency on mass immigration, because our economy now, whether we agree with it or not, has become virtually dependent on immigrant labour in order to function.
Yeah.
And this is where a lot of the sort of traditional far right, especially parties like Reform, that rail about immigration, there's no doubt in my mind that a government led by those parties would actually increase immigration. And the reason why is because that immigration is being driven by an economic system that requires this constant influx of foreign labour to function. They not only don't want to change that system, but they want to make it worse. And so I think in order to remedy the sort of the problem with immigrant labour, you've got to get rid of that dependency.
And would your party be spending more on military or?
Well, I think inevitably we would,
Yeah.
because our proposals to do with the military, again, we would like to be a militarily independent country so that we aren't reliant on supranational alliances or reliant on other countries to do that for us. And part of that would involve a period of national service for all young men.
Yeah.
Now, in order to do that, you could never just do that overnight. You've got to have the infrastructure, you've got to have the military industries to actually provide material for all of that. So it would probably take, from the point of forming a government, it would possibly take 3 or 4 years before you could actually start that. But it would obviously involve investing more in the military.
Yeah.
It would also involve investing in the industries that are going to support that. Because obviously someone's got to build all the facilities, someone's got to build all the equipment, which is good for British workers because that's mass opportunities for employment. And by sort of doing that, you will then also gain that sort of economic industrial growth at the same time. But you'd have to have that economic industrial growth in order to enable military expansion.
Yeah, you've got to find the money from somewhere, obviously.
Yeah, there was a really good point someone was making to me yesterday where there was someone I know, you wouldn't know him, but he was doing a look at this budget and he was saying how much money in the budget is effectively being wasted. And one point in particular was £30 billion is effectively being lost to the financial system because of the way the Bank of England relates to like retail banks, and it worked out to about £30 billion effectively just disappearing in a circle, effectively, where no one's spending it and no one can touch it. It's just in permanent limbo, and that's £30 billion for a start. Now, a lot of people would also obviously say, would you cut foreign aid? Would you cut all foreign aid money? I think realistically there is a lot to be cut. I don't think it's reasonable for countries like India to be receiving money from Britain. But I do think, I've got a question in a sec, I'll take it in a sec. I do think that there is an argument to be made that you would still have to use some money for foreign aid, simply because if you've got people here that you do not want living here, you've got to have somewhere to actually send those people to or put them, which is where the best way to do that is to actually deal with the country that you want to send these people to, which is going to cost you money to move those people there. So I can imagine there will be situations where foreign aid to prevent refugee problems, whatever, would be a better spend of it, but in general a lot of that could be cut. But I think the money can be found if people are actually willing to do the work, which again is why addressing the mentality problem has to be a priority. Can I take?
Just going back to the green agenda, do you see any value in stripping the green agenda of the politics and of the blood, and keeping the green initiative, which we're in business is quite important now, where, like say, construction, for example, we've all got a green initiative, we've all got a quota to fill, and it's about how much we can reuse, recycle, and just readapt things that we're taking, you know, from like any old building site, and just reusing as much material as possible. Do you see any value in getting rid of the bloat and the politics, but keeping the initiative to be a little bit more greener?
Well, I would keep the green agenda definitely in London. As you know, Sadiq Khan is trying to build houses on parks, etc., isn't he?
Yeah.
I would definitely keep it in London with it being our capital.
There's just a difference between
I
the
agree.
green agenda, which is politically driven,
Yeah.
it's stupid, and the green initiative where actually you are recycling, you are
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
keep the green
it's
initiative.
like being sensible and then just removing all the politics.
I would remove the politics.
Yeah, well, I suppose the difference there,
Yeah.
and I totally agree with you,
Yeah.
that is something to be kept. And I think the difference is because that is tangible, whereas the green agenda politically is intangible.
Yeah.
Whereas tangible things like recycling, reusing materials, avoiding landfill waste, that is all very quantifiable, and so it's actually much less wasteful, and you can genuinely benefit from that.
Yeah.
And I think realistically, this is one of those situations, especially like anything to do with environmentalism, where you can actually do a lot more good for the environment simply by doing very basic things like recycling or planting a tree, etc., than you can through all these really grandiose schemes that involve people flying to summits in Brazil at the cost of tens of millions of pounds. You can achieve a lot more just with tangible, low-level things that people can do and measure and quantify.
That's why I want to just differentiate from the agenda to the initiative.
Yeah, no, that's a point well made, I think, because it is different.
There was just one, I don't know if anyone else wanted to ask. I was just going to ask how members from local branches are making a difference to their communities. You know, like, I know you got
I was going to say something.
Oh, sorry, you know, you obviously like the skills tapping, things like that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, you can answer that better than I can, because you do all
Sorry,
this.
regarding members making a difference in the communities, we have established branches all over the country, and what they're focusing on is communities. Like I said to that gentleman, they're getting themselves known in the community, and they're going to various events with keeping politics aside. Once they get known in the communities, they're getting into charitable work, voluntary work, etc., homeless and kitchens, and the more they do things, and the more they get known, then they can bring the politics into it. I benefited because I've lived in my community 20 years and I knew a lot of people. So I had vast help and I had knowledge of the area. So I think if anybody starts of being like a branch manager, get into your community first. Know who your councillors are. Know what your community wants. Knock on doors. Don't post leaflets. Knock on doors. Ask the people what they're wanting change. And you know something that was funny? I did that in Leeds. And there's nobody knocked on their doors for 10 years. I was one of the first people to knock on their doors. And the change, what they asked for me, was just a normal citizen would want. Better economy, better living, less expenses, you know what I mean? A new government, you know. But apart from that, that's what it entails.
Yeah.
And all regarding the National Railway Party will be just going over a year now. We have established branches all over the country. A couple of weeks ago, we opened a new branch in Leicestershire, which is fantastic. I've been talking to Carol from Bradford. We're going to get together next year and try and open somewhere in Bradford, which is a multicultural place like where I live in basically. But most of all, it's down to the members of this party. The members make this a success. I'd like to thank all the branch managers who've been involved all year. What's been fantastic people, and it's a pleasure to be in this party. So to end it, I would just like to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and onwards and upwards for next year. You won't need to take pictures.
Yeah, and just from me, the one thing I'll add is when you're doing things for people, and if you're going to do things in your local area, associations, charity, whatever it is, you have to do it unconditionally. You can't do it and then basically say, well, I'm only going to do this for you if you agree to support my party. You can't do that. You have to do things unconditionally. You have to prove that you are actually willing to do things for people, even if you don't like the person, even if for whatever reason, maybe you don't like their religion, maybe you don't like where they live, whatever. You have to prove that you will actually do useful things for people, regardless of whether you have any sort of personal relationship with them, because this is how you actually prove that you are a genuine political movement. And this is how you get it away from this perception, because the public perception of a lot of nationalist parties, especially over the last sort of 10 years since the BNP disappeared, the public perception of a lot of nationalists is that, and I'm not saying this is true, this is just how the public sees nationalist parties, as people that take advantage of problems to try and push a political agenda. That's the perception that a lot of the public have. I'm not saying it's a correct perception, but for instance, like somebody gets stabbed and then nationalists protest it, it's totally well-meaning, and I'm never going to say it isn't, but it's very easy for the media, the left, whatever, to basically paint it as, well, you're only doing that because you're trying to score points off of it. Now, the way that you avoid falling into that trap, and the way you make those attacks like basically impossible, is by doing things that are unconditionally good for people, because then those attacks don't work. And the reality is that most of the attacks that the left in particular have had on nationalists for the last decade, they've been attacks not about the ideals and the principles on the table, but they've been attacks based on the way people have behaved or the things people have done. You know, we can think of how many nationalist parties, movements have had problems with like drug abuse, sex abuse, stealing, grifting. It's horrific, and that is the thing that actually destroys people's perception of those parties as being genuine. Now, we don't do any of those things, because to us, being a nationalist is not about saying the right things on the internet or dressing the right way or looking the right way. It's about the way you behave and the way you interact with other people. And being a nationalist is ultimately about putting your nation before yourself. And if you make your principles into not the things you say but the way you behave, those attacks will never work. And you can tell that they'll never work because they will stop making them, and the people that yesterday were sort of bashing you, they will start to ignore you because they realise that there's no way of making what you're doing look bad. And so, yeah, I'd say just when you're doing stuff, you've got to do stuff unconditionally, and it's got to be genuine. You never do it as a character. You're not a persona. You're not a personality. You're doing it. You don't have nicknames. You're doing it as yourself. You know, you are just a genuine person, because the average person can smell a rat when something is disingenuous. They're never going to be interested in giving any sort of authority to media personalities, people like Ricky Doolan, Tommy Robinson. They're never going to, even if people agree with what they're saying, they'll never do that. And so I think this is where you've got to just be a genuine person. If you are genuine, even if you say things that are radical, or you're doing things that are radical, people will actually be willing to listen if they believe that you are genuinely holding those beliefs, that you're not just saying it because you want to get attention on the internet. But that aside, thank you to everyone who's come today. I'm going to another meeting in Southampton next weekend, where we've got a lot of our sort of southern members, people from branches in London, Portsmouth, and a couple from Cornwall coming across. But it's really good to see most people here today, I think, have come from the sort of north of England in general. And it's really good that after a year, it's very much been like the tortoise of the hare, because the amount of people that when we started said, oh, that's going to go nowhere, that's going to do nothing. And the parties and certain individuals that said that have basically imploded and detonated in the meantime. And yet we're still here. And that is how you've got to get out of that model of make a load of noise, advertise yourself, get a load of people, and then 6 months later detonate because you realise that you actually lied in order to get everyone in the room. So I'm really proud to be the leader of this party, and I'm really grateful to everyone who came today. And I've got a few membership packs for a few people that are here that I need to give out to them. But if I encourage anyone here who isn't, by all means join the party, get involved. If you're interested in setting a branch up where you are and we don't already have one, David and I can help you do that. The party will pay for the relevant equipment, material, whatever. We also